Oh, I say it every time, but that music does get me hyped. My name's Ian. I'm one of the Hustle Brothers here. I brought my two other boys with me. We are here for eVTOL Fan Club. We have Race, we have Mark. Guys, how are we getting on?
Very good, very good. I think Mark was a bit of a fan favorite last time he was on, so we had to make sure he came back and give us all the insight that we need. Mark, how have you been getting on?
Been getting along well. I'm sitting in my hangar in very hot, steamy North Carolina right now, but that's what a lot of pilots do when it's too hot. You just sit in a lawn chair in front of your airplane. So,
Guys, we were getting a quick tour of Mark's hangar there. Look, he's sitting behind, or his baby sitting behind him. He also has a second baby behind him there, and he's going to get another one. So do you know what? It's like having three children. Guys, this is eVTOL Fan Club. So any of you that are used to eVTOL Weekly, this is going to be completely different. eVTOL Weekly is we're going to come with the weekly news. We're going to discuss our thoughts on that. eVTOL Fan Club's a bit different. You can steer the conversation. Jump into the comments, ask your questions. This is going to be a lot more interactive. You want to call in, you can call in. We have an aviation specialist here. We have Mark Berry. Mark has a lot of contacts and he's going to embrace some of that knowledge that people share with him. Hopefully we can get a few interviews out of different specialists as well if they're comfortable with it. But where do we start today? Do you know what? I think a nice place to start is certification. Mark, there's a bit of a misunderstanding when it comes to certification. Even I was quite surprised when you started going through it with us off air. Do you want to give a rundown on how the certification process for the eVTOLs works?
yeah, I can give it a shot. And we had discussed this offline at one point about potentially me making some content which can give just a what we call in the aerospace industry a 50,000 foot overview, and then from that you can dive down and really focus in on the different aspects of it. But in the context of what Joby and ACHR are going through now is and their certification process, what they are aiming for is what's called TC, or a type certification. And that is it's a well-defined process. And this is, one thing when you are when you're everybody who is going to deliver an aircraft that's going to be used for commercial purposes has to have a type certification. The airplane sitting behind me is a Mooney, and it had to get a type certification before it could be sold to the general public. And it varies based on what the airplane will be used for. And so if the regulations, you hear people say, oh, it's going to get certified in Part 91. Part 91 is just a reg for general aviation. And I suspect I don't know for sure, and I'll double check it. This will be part of my own research that I'll do, but I'm pretty sure that eVTOLs will most likely be certified in Part 91. Then you have larger aircraft, anything that's over 12,500 pounds, and has, I think, over 9 passengers, needs to be Part 25. And that is where you get into like Gulfstreams, Cessnas, Bombardiers, Hawkers, if you're, or not Hawkers, but Dassaults, like a Falcon jet. Shout out to our European counterparts as well. When you get to that level, then you're developing in Part 25, and again, it's a similar flight. It's a similar type certification, with the exception that those are more complex airplanes. So and they fly at higher altitudes. They go through more rigorous weather. for example, you heard Brandon previously say that the hover aircraft will be FIKI certified,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and FIKI is flight into known icing. The airplane behind me is not FIKI certified. If there's ice, you turn around immediately and get away from it, or you just avoid it at all costs. But any airliner that you get on, or any aircraft that's that gets FIKI certified, then it has heat going into the leading edges, or it has boots that expand and contract, and pretty much that. So the certification, like that would be when I talk about the 50,000 foot overview of getting a TC, that whole roadmap. FIKI would be, a small subset of that roadmap, and that is
Okay.
something you'd have that is a part of the flight test program that you have to first design, you have to do company test, and then when you're ready, then you write test plans. Those test plans have to be approved by the authorities, by the FAA. And once those test plans are approved, then you go and you conduct the test. Um, and and then you prove that what you were originally designing for that meets its intent, or is functional. And of course, there are just within FIKI certification, like the United States has icing tunnels, NASA has icing tunnels where you can go and they can actually simulate ice in the airplane flying through ice in that wind tunnel. So you don't have to go necessarily and demonstrate it out with your airplane in nature. You could theoretically just put a scale model in a wind tunnel, prove that it works, but typically, actually, let me back up a little. Typically, you're doing that to prove company test, and then you will go and demonstrate it for the FAA. And then the FAA will say, yes, okay, you've passed that subset. So you are, maybe 5% there. What you'll see with eVTOLs when they start getting their credit is just the air handling qualities of the airplane. You hear people talk a lot about transition, where they're actually going from a hover to a real flight configuration.
Yeah.
That transition is very critical because the wing's not flying yet, but your lift fans are they're sharing, the capability of just keeping the craft in the air. So demonstrating that and getting through that'll be another subset and of just the certification process. And all of those little subsets need to be demonstrated to the FAA. And what's also another caveat to certification is within each one of these small subsets, say you have propulsion, they're called designated engineering representatives. And when I spoke about it last week, those are people that the FAA recognizes as experts in those small subset. So you'll have a mechanical systems DER, and you'll have a FIKI flight into known icing DER. You'll have a air handling or air qualities or flight control qualities DER, and each one of those are involved in seeing that the engineering that you are designing meets the intent of what you want to do. Then they sign off on that design, and then it has to go and be demonstrated by very specific flight test pilots who can perform those tests. And a lot of times the company has their own pilots, but then the FAA brings in their pilots to actually get credit. So it's a very, very it's a long process, but it's a mountain that needs to be climbed. Everybody needs to climb it, and what's great about it, but that is also, those are metrics that can be tracked. So what we were discussing is, and one thing I want to start getting involved with is, as ACHR and Joby and HOVR are going through this process, we can start to follow that roadmap and
Yeah.
basically be like, okay, how far are they up Mount Everest? We could even be like, they're at base camp 1 and they're they're not even in the danger zone yet, right? Like there's all sorts of things that we as value investors could start tracking. And then when they come on their conference calls, they could say, well, this is where we're at. And again, I mean, they have fiduciary responsibilities, so they can't, you know, the different companies have to be honest. So there's a very, so to back, to rehash it, there's a very, very defined process in certification, and that's just to get type certification.
Yeah.
Then once you have type certification, you can then deliver your aircraft to customers, or you can go and start a 135 charter and start flying services, which is the goal. But the next step is there's another certification, which is the manufacturing side. And that side is you prove to the FAA, and it'll be the FAA here because these aircraft are going to be built in the United States, that your processes are always going to be the same. So that when the aircraft rolls off the line, it is exactly the same as the one before it. And that is when you hear, if that airplane has a deviation and it comes off the line and it has a discrepancy, it's technically not airworthy then. And you have to go back and you have to fix that discrepancy before the airplane can be delivered. Like I can't go and put different screws on the airplane behind me because it'll then technically be unairworthy.
Yeah.
And because it's a certified airplane. So the manufacturing process as well, and this is important for investors to understand. When they say they're going to produce 10,000 aircraft in 1 year, they could potentially do that, but they have to have a very, very well automated, most likely a very well automated assembly line that is approved by the authorities, and they have to follow that every time. So when ship
And-
number 10 comes off the line, it is exactly the same as ship number 140.
And
if
is it
it's
like
not the
do they do it per like factory then that you get that certification to make sure that factory is there like a factory's approved, or is it just your process is approved?
It would be the process. Of course, like they're only going to have. Well, I mean, I guess you have a good point. They're doing these smaller factories right now.
That's what I
You
was
know,
thinking.
Joby has their factory out in California, but then they're talking they're going to build a bigger factory in Dayton, Ohio. And that is their scaled factory. So they are probably proving out all of that certification at that factory, and then they can go and scale it at their Dayton facility once it's finished.
And I imagine can they both run simultaneously with both of these certification processes?
Yes,
even though they're
and
not
you do
finished at this moment in time, but they can still get the manufacturing certificate.
That is yes, that's a perfect question. Typically, they run at this they run at the same time, or you're developing both of those at the same time. So when you get TC, you also have TI. It's called TC, and then you have TIA. And forgive me, I don't know what the acronym is. If there's anybody in the chat that does and can shout it out what a TIA is without looking it up on Grok, or I'll come fly to you and we'll go for a flight. If you're in the United States and on the Eastern Seaboard. But yes, they do. You typically want to get type certification, and you want to get your TIA or your manufacturing cert right at the same time. And in the case of larger established companies, you will sometimes have your manufacturing will start going ahead of you, to where you're going to have 10 or 15 airplanes sitting all on the manufacturing floor and could be ready to be delivered, and you don't have your type certificate yet. I know that with one of the recent large private jet manufacturers, with the release of one of their new aircraft, that was the case where they got their type certification, and they had 10 or 15 airplanes just sitting waiting to be delivered, and they couldn't deliver because they didn't have their TC, and the manufacturing line was ready to go, And it's like, okay, as soon as we get past these last few tests, these cert tests,
Yeah.
we're going to get TC, and then we're going to deliver a bunch of airplanes. And that's exactly what happened. So it's a really cool, I mean, it's a fascinating process within the aerospace industry. Of course, and this is, I talked about this mountain that needs to be climbed. Typically, I think HondaJet, they invested about $1 billion on their factory and their certification and everything for their HJ420. I think it was about $1 billion investment. I mean, you look at Archer right now and their market cap, they've already got the money for that runway. So
Yeah.
now they're just at the point of, hey, who do we got to pay to support us to get this rolling? So I may make it sound like, oh, it's a huge mountain to climb, and it may sound like, oh, they're not going to get there till past the Olympics. I don't necessarily believe that. I think that they could really, especially with the certain executive orders that have come out. That executive order that recently came out to say that's basically saying to the FAA, whatever resources you need, you've got, because
Okay.
we don't want to lag behind. And also, just it came out last week, I believe, in Paris, where the different authorities, the FAA, EASA, which is the European authority, and then I think the authorities in the Middle East, they're all finally agreeing, yes, let's all work together so that, and what that means is as soon as they get a type certification in the United States, then the other authorities will recognize that type certification as well.
And will it be the opposite way? If they get type certification in Europe or the Middle East, then the FAA will accept it? Is that sort of a loophole like around it, or?
Yeah, I think what you could see is the Middle East could grant them a type certification to operate, maybe a little bit ahead of schedule, and the
Yeah.
FAA may be like, we want to see a couple more things. But I think at the end of the day, they're all going to be in concert. If I was a betting man, I would think that you're going to have the FAA will lead on it, just because these are being developed in the United States. And I think the other authorities, they may grant them some things so they can just say, hey, look, we are ahead. It looks very good for, I mean, the Middle East is wanting to really show that they are stepping out into the next wave of technology, so that they may grant some deviations. And you get that a lot. Like you can have an airplane get a type certification, but it's a limited type certification. So, and that has happened where like a small business jet gets certified, but it doesn't have its FIKI certification yet. It's flight into known icing. So they'll be like, okay, yeah, you can go and deliver these aircraft, but they cannot fly in icing. And so there is that as well. And potentially you could see the authorities in other countries grant those limited authorities as they're developing. And then that would allow them to start doing their routes and do revenue generating flights.
Yeah.
But again, the mountain, it's a mountain to climb, but this is the first time in my career, and I've been in this industry since the early 2000s. So I've seen multiple certification programs at different levels, and this is the first time I have seen the federal government be so on board to say, yes, we are going to support this new type of aircraft and this new, just this new mode of transportation, because it is completely different. How you're marrying a helicopter to, or you're doing the synergy of a helicopter to an airplane back to a helicopter. I think that the federal government recognizes that there are so many use cases to these new flying aircraft, and to be fair, they're actually, the powertrain is a lot more simplistic. An electric powertrain is far more simplistic than what what has previously been certified. And that's another point too. Like the engine needs to be certified, the avionics need to be certified. the airframe itself needs to be certified. Every component that goes on that airplane has to be certified for that particular airplane. So just to that point, to go back years back in the early 2000s, you had the Eclipse jet in the United States, and it was going to be this very light jet. It was going to revolutionize the market, and their original engine was way underpowered. So they then had to go to a different engine manufacturer and say, okay, we need an engine that can meet the performance that we're aiming for, and that set them back years. But a turbine engine is a very, very complex machine in itself. An electric motor, relatively, is very, very simple. So you can scale that very quickly. And the fact that you
Yeah.
have multiple motors, on a lot of, like this airplane here, it's certified, but it's only got one motor. If the fan stops spinning, the pilot starts sweating because you've just become a glider. So, so the redundancy with all of these motors that are going to be on these these eVTOLs adds an enormous amount of safety elements to it that will much quicker get them through certification. And the design of an electric motor is far less complex in terms of moving parts, in terms of components. So again, that 1/3 of an airplane, because typically it's the airplane, it's the airframe, it's the avionics and systems, and then it's the propulsion system. Simplifying that propulsion system makes it drastically makes the climb not so steep of having to climb that mountain.
We then will jump across to the comments. So Terry has a question. Theory when Archer will vertically lift. I think we're putting too much pressure on Archer, with this vertical lift. We've seen them do the conventional takeoff and landing with the pilot on board. Mark, are you worried that we haven't seen them vertically lift the pilot yet? And how hard would it be?
Yeah, I'm not. I think, and I spoke to this a little bit last week. They have a defined test program, and they have test points that they are going to hit. They have their own company roadmap to develop their own company data, and I think just right now they are developing just their CTOL capabilities, their common takeoff or their your normal takeoff and landing capabilities. But Archer has already demonstrated time and time and time again that their aircraft can take off vertically, convert, and fly, and then come back. It could be something as simple as just the pilot integration to the fly-by-wire system. They may be 2 weeks behind, and this happens all the time because you have all these different groups developing different systems that all come together. And like you used to watch, like you watch Apollo 13 or something, and they're talking, well, we're not ready to go yet because this group hasn't met their design criteria or done something. It can be something as simple as that, to where they are still doing gauntlet testing, because Archer and Joby and all these companies, they have what's called a SIL, a systems integration lab, where they are putting all of these motors and all of the systems on a bench, and they're running them through all of their different paces on the ground, and they're failing them. They're doing all sorts of company tests to prove that the software works, and the pilot integration works, how all that works together. They may just be like, all right, let's go hit these other test points first, and then we'll go ahead and do our conversion. I suspect you'll probably see it fairly soon, that they'll have a pilot in the loop, and the pilot will be fully controlling the aircraft in a VTOL configuration to take off to CTOL and then back to a vertical. So it doesn't concern me.
Yeah. Well,
If it's 6 months, if it's 6 months out and they've not done it, then or if they get to the next conference call and they have not converted, I think that would actually be a very good marker is like, okay, your next conference call is at what time? Okay, you got a pilot in the loop, but you're not converting, and you went from 4 rotors to 2 rotors. Analysts are going to ask these questions.
Yeah.
And so if they have some fundamental, like I said earlier, with Eclipse having just a motor that wasn't powerful enough, then they have a bit of explaining to do. But I think at the end of the day, it's just part of their test program, and I'm sure they have it scheduled. They're not going to release that information because that's privileged information to Archer.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you'll see them convert fairly soon.
Thank you so much for that. And now we have Tom Letter here. I read a post on Reddit. Don't get me started on Reddit, bro. Which got deleted in the meantime. But I think the guy has written major issues about the Neutron, but got hard down voted. And I would like to know your opinion. I continue. Seems like there's an issue to get Neutron to the pad because the bridge on the causeway is very old and will get replaced in 2026, 27, and the water channel is far from getting done. They did not even start digging, so they want to bring. Also, how they want to bring Neutron to the pad. Maybe that's really a reason for those inside sales. And this guy in Reddit mentioned. Tom, I'd just be very careful of what you read on the likes of Reddit. It's an anonymous platform, and people can spread absolute whatever on it.
Misinformation.
We were speaking to Dave G 2 days ago, and we're speaking to Scott O tonight. It might be a better place to ask that type of question there, just because we want to try and focus on the eVTOLs at the moment. But thank you so much for your question, brother.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. It's something that Neutron and stuff that goes into space and never comes back is a little bit outside of my. I'm not that good of an engineer. Those guys are the rock stars.
You're all good. Iman OS. Congratulations on taking the big jump and becoming a content creator, guys. If you haven't seen Iman OS, he has started creating videos around Joby Aviation. I gave it a watch, and I appreciate the hard work, brother. Keep it up. If you want to call in ever, please do. Curtis, my good friend, how are you getting on today? Type inspection authorization.
There you go. Yeah, TIA. Type inspection authorization. Yep. And that basically means that the company has the ability to inspect their own product. They have an inspection inspectors. So, and that's another thing. Like you see, once the airplane is designed, the engineering effort drastically drops down, and then you get into just, all right, we got to make donuts and we got to push donuts out the back door. And that is so then you have an army of mechanics that are assembling the airplane, and then you have inspectors, and that TIA authority is the FAA saying, yes, you as a company have the authority to inspect your own product and release it, and the FAA does not have to come in and give you a TC for each one of your aircraft.
Well, and then would they just do random testing then, or do they do testing at the very end? Is there any point where the FAA can get control of that?
As long as there aren't issues. Now, once again, all of the manufacturers are like you do not want to get on the bad side of the authorities.
Yeah.
So, and all manufacturers walk this fine line. They walk the line, I think, a little bit more in development and test. But once you get into manufacturing, if there is a problem, you have to disclose it. Otherwise, the FAA can come in and really, it can really be a problem. So, the FAA and the different manufacturers are always monitoring, or the FAA is always monitoring them.
Yeah.
But the manufacturers are also self-regulating themselves, and if there's a problem, they go to the FAA. I mean, if you have an airplane that's not airworthy, you have to report it. So if they have a problem, they have to report it.
I
And
guess
this
it's
is
not in
just
their
it.
benefit either.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I guess it wouldn't be in their benefit either if it wasn't airworthy to just try and get it passed and then produce all of these crafts that weren't actually airworthy.
Oh,
So-
it would end a company
100%.
altogether if there was an accident. I
Well,
mean, this is why aviation insurance is so expensive, because anytime there's an accident in aviation, you know, it's the
usually
manufacturer gets sued, the mechanic gets sued, the pilot gets sued, the pilot's dog gets sued. There is so yeah, it's why general aviation since the 1970s has really not grown. The airplane behind me is a 1975. And this is an amazing flying airplane. It's older than I am. So, and there was a real renaissance in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. But then in the 80s, airplanes, I mean, I'm not against lawyers, but there was a lot of lawsuits where manufacturers were getting sued. And in general aviation, I think they say like 20% or 25% of the cost of the airplane is liability insurance just to the manufacturer.
Jesus, that's a high number, isn't it?
It's an enormous amount of because manufacturers are always getting sued. So
That's-
And then,
Yeah, Karen.
like, going back to, like, if they have to report it to the authorities, does that then become public information once it's reported?
not necessarily, because it's not like it's gotten out to the public. These things
Okay.
are happening internally. It could be something as simple as just I guess they drop they're drilling a hole and it goes down through a fuel pipe or something like that, and then they say, well, can we rivet the fuel pipe, or do we have to replace the fuel pipe or the fuel line? Most likely, but again, when that happens, we won't say a fuel line. That's too drastic. Say you're drilling and you run the drill through a different piece of structure, and now you have this hole in the structure.
Yeah.
That's going to go to what is called Manufacturing Review Board. MRB is going to look at it. Stress analysts are going to look at it. If they can't come up with a solution, then they may go to the FAA and say, hey, we need to do this repair. This airplane has now got a small deviation. Do you approve it? FAA will say, yes, we approve it. And they go on their merry way. And the public doesn't know any different. So in the context, now let's look at, and this is what a lot of the public knows about, is the 737 MAX.
Yeah.
The 737 MAX was catastrophic, and that was, and there was some whistleblowers with Boeing that came out and said, hey, when we were going through our development program, there were internal memos saying this is not safe. We need to we need to add more features to this airplane so that it's safe. And they rushed it through, and then they went out and flew, and then they got in some conditions where the airplane was not safe, and it was a tragic loss of life. And in that case, of course, there was, and you can follow that. There's all sorts of documentaries now on the 737 MAX debacle, and that would have been and then the FAA got very, very much involved, and we need to now go and recertify this airplane, because we need to now go and add new components to add safety, add redundancy, and go and prove that we are safe. So I think I'm deviating a little bit. When you're in the manufacturing process, it could be it's more of just, it'd probably be more of, they get a year in, and then the company says, hey, if we improve these processes, we can improve profitability, we can scale quicker. Then they would go back to the FAA to say, we want to improve these processes. Do you agree to this? Blah, 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 blah. And then that gets
a revision
and that's
of it.
yeah. So
I find,
And then,
sorry, just jumping in there. In terms of actually, like, so you've trained to be a pilot. In terms of like training the pilots up, roughly how long would you be expecting that to take? In terms of, would they be training, if they trained up now and we got the certification in 2026, would they be ready now, or would that?
Yes.
Yeah. So a year probably would be enough, do you think, or?
Yeah, because right now in the United States, you have a very, very large, there is a pilot shortage. So there's this very big push to start pushing pilots through the pipeline to get into the, so that, because the airline has a requirement, I think it's 65, you have to retire. So, and if you look at the demographics of pilots in the airlines, it's predominantly older people. So you're going to have this large mass retiring. And so in the last 4 to 5 years, there's been this enormous push to start to bring up new pilots. Those pilots that are going through flight school right now, they'll need a commercial license, and they're going to need a type certification. What the actual operators will require of them, they may say, I want you to have 1,500 hours of flying time. 1,500 hours is kind of the bottom. It's actually what's required for an aircraft transport pilot certification or ticket license. But to fly these craft, you probably will not need an ATP. You'll probably just need a commercial license. And with that commercial license, it's 250 hours. So, I mean, it takes 40 hours to get your private. It takes 40 to 60 to get your private, 40 to 60 to get an instrument rating. And then typically your next step is your commercial. And so I don't think there's going to be, I don't think they'll have a problem finding pilots, especially when it comes for this new exciting opportunity. Yeah. You always have pilots coming out of the military who have just enormous amounts of time and capabilities. So I don't think scaling up pilots is going to necessarily be, it's going to be a great opportunity for pilots.
Yeah.
And people that want that opportunity are going to take it. And if there is if they need more pilots, they're going to increase the pay, and pilots are going to, then, all right, I'm going to leave what I'm doing right now to go fly these airplanes.
Then we have Imano West. Welcome to the crew, Mark.
Thank you.
And then Terry, thanks, Mark. That's exactly what I want to hear here, I'm a believer. Then Terry comes back, comparing landing gear of Joby versus ACHR. Is ACHR's landing gear too much, or is Joby's landing gear not enough?
I think you see Joby's landing. Well, I understand what people say, because Joby's landing gear looks very thin and small, but that could also just be a tubular steel or a titanium, like truss brace. Go look at a Cessna 182 that has a retractable landing gear, or a 172 that has a retractable landing gear. You'd be like, that thing looks like a toothpick, but you can slam that thing down hard, and the gear will handle it. Archer's landing gear it looks very, very robust, but they have a lot of aerodynamic shapes that are forming around the gear. So I think that both landing gears are going to be plenty strong. And this also gets into certification and safety. Both manufacturers are going to have to prove that your gear is going to have to absorb energy in the event you have a failure. And you got, like, they'll do drop tests where it's like, okay, we got to design this thing to where we drop it from 10 feet or 15 feet and it just drops out. And either the gear takes that energy absorption, or the gear and the seats all need to compress. So I wouldn't be Joby's landing gear looks small. It looks like, it might be a little weak, but I guarantee it's strong, and it'll be able to take any any drop test to get through certification, because there are very specific design guidelines for that.
Then we have I'm on OS. Oh, thanks, Liam. No problem at all. Then, how will Trump's executive order and the Paris 5 Nation Agreement accelerate commercialization timeline compared to SMG consultant forecast? Are you familiar with the SMG consultant forecast?
I'm not. No.
I think they've
Get
said
some homework.
now. If I'm wrong, I'm on OS. This is only going off the top of my head. I think they said Joby to reach commercialization by 2027 and ACHR by 2028. But guys, please come back to me if I'm wrong there. So I think he's saying, will it bring the timeline forward? How soon can we expect commercialization after this?
Yeah. So again, commercialization is you're gonna have to get through type certification, and then you're gonna need to get TIA. So that's climbing that mountain. The authorities getting the green light, the FAA and them all working in conjunction could definitely accelerate that, just because resources are now going to start going to supporting both Joby and Archer in their flight test program, and to get credit for all these different flight test gates or hurdles that they're going to have to go through or jump over. There will be FAA representatives for each one of these hurdles and gates. So it's all going to be a function of just how quickly the world recognizes and the authorities recognize how important this is. I think it's certainly going to help. It's going to help a lot that it's getting recognized and it's getting executive orders to give support to get these airplanes certified and into commercialization. 2027. I mean, that's a year and a half. What are they saying? Are they saying commercialization by the end of the year? Or like, what have both Joby and
It
Archer
was
been?
pretty far out for both of them. I
Yeah,
presume it was the end of the year, and the end of the year 28 for Archer.
yeah.
Oh no, here we go. SMG entry into service Q3 27 and Archer Q2 28.
That sounds, I mean, that's 3 years away for Archer and 2.5. I'd like to see him beat it, just because I'm rooting for him.
Yeah,
That's
like I again, these are the people that are working for these companies are the same people that are working for SpaceX. Unbelievably talented people, and they're young, they're vibrant, or if they're not young, they're unbelievably experienced. And just we call them in the industry graybeards, just because they're they're so knowledgeable that they so I would love to see them beat that by 6 months to a year. This is again why I think it would be great to create on the Hustle Brothers show, we go ahead and let's create a roadmap for the different and say, all right, this is the mountain you're all climbing, and we could start looking and following them as a forum, and work together collectively to go on this process with them. And then when they do an earnings call, or when they release information, we can say, well, how does this tie into what we think they're at on their roadmap?
I think that's absolutely class idea.
It'd be
Mark.
awesome, yeah.
And we wouldn't be able to do it without you. But just speaking on that, I've sort of tied myself to, because they said it was going to be by the end of the year, and then they were saying 2026. So I'd be quite disappointed if it was 2027 or 2028. But I could see, now that you've explained about how the type certification works and the manufacturing certification, that this is no easy fix. It's not going to be a short time span. And I think it's another thing we need to delve into and see. Maybe we can get an understanding of how far away we are today. Because at the moment, we haven't just taken their word for it. And obviously, they're going to be over-ambitious because it's their stock at the end of the day, and they're always going to give optimistic targets. They're never going to be saying the worst-case scenario, because they'd create an awful lot of fear if they were starting to say it's going to be 28, 29. after all the backing they've got.
A very good example of a metrics that was put out was, I think it was in February, Joby came out and said, we've certified our tail. And what that means is that their tail, the design of the tail, which is very, very important because it's got 2 motors up on it. It's a very critical piece of structure. And the tail will be designed separate from the rest of the airframe and will come together. And that's why they're certifying them, or they're getting, they're certifying them separately. But them getting their tail certified means that the manufacturing process to build the tail is now approved. That's part of the TIA. They've put the tail in a jig, and they've started, putting all these different loads and stresses on it, and they're measuring all that data. And it's called gauntlet testing, where you just sit there and you move the thing up and down 10,000 times and then see, did it crack? Did it fail? They passed that in February. So that's a good example. That's a good metric to be like, okay, their tail is certified. The next thing you'll see is, all right, is your fuselage certified, or is your wing? That's going to be a big part, is when they come out and say, okay, our wing now is certified. That means all of the loads that go through those rotors and everything has passed. Those will be metrics that we can follow.
That's actually so interesting, because I remember when that news came out, I think the feeling in the community was a bit like, what, like, why is that important? Like, just the tail, we want to hear the full type certification. But seeing it from your perspective now, of like, that's basically like a tick box of the tail is now sort of finished and showing. Yes, it is like a milestone, isn't it, in that type certification process of that part of the craft is finished, and now we need to move forward or move on to other items.
Yeah, and again, when it comes into the manufacturing of these aircraft, like you look at, I remember, sorry, a door just slammed shut from the wind. I remember just recently they were talking about how Rocket Lab has one of the largest fiber placement machines. So it's a composite it's a composite rocket, and it's a robot that lays down that fiber, and it does it every time the exact same way before they put it in an autoclave and bake it. A lot of companies
purchased 2 more of them.
Yes, because they're scaling. Yeah. So, so Joby, and I think I've actually seen photos, they're doing it a different way. They have molds, and then they may have machines that come and cut the fiber out, and that's called a pre-preg. And you lay it down in like a fabric and all these methods, and then you suck it down with a vacuum, and then you put it in an autoclave and heat it. And that pre-preg, that the hardening material, the actual hardener, comes out and melts and sucks in, so it becomes all one homogeneous part. And then when you heat that to a certain, for a certain period of time. So the process of building their tail is just that, because they probably don't have right now an automated fiber placement to build their tail. They're building them by hand, which also then begs, okay, how can you build 10,000 of these things if you're doing, if you're doing them by hand? But that process alone is just, and it's not a bad process. I mean, heck, the F-35, inlets were done by, or, not the F-30, but the F-22 inlets were laid up by hand. Was done back in the 90s and whatnot. So, but yeah, that's a good point. It's a tick mark. You've passed this milestone. A next milestone to look for is the certification, the build certification of just their fuselage and wing. And that may be more rigorous. They may have to do blade off scenarios where you actually are, you're going to be spinning those blades at max power, and then you're actually going to have to let one of them go. And now this thing is going to start vibrating like crazy, and you got to get the motor shut down, or can all of that vibration translate into the airframe, and the airframe can take that energy. That's a certification process that happens with jet airplanes all the time. Is you have to demonstrate, okay, if one of these fan discs comes apart, can it be contained, and can we keep flying without the aircraft catastrophically coming apart?
Yeah.
So both Joby and Archer are going to have to demonstrate that.
And to be fair, I think we'd want them to be doing rigorous testing. This sort
Without a
of
doubt.
touches on what we said before about we're going to have zero margin for error. If there
Yes.
was any problems,
Yes.
I think the whole industry probably would suffer.
Yes.
So even though we do want to push for that type certification, because we all want to just get to commercialization, sometimes we don't have to see the bigger picture and say, I'd prefer them to do it 100,000 times rather than the 10,000 if it meant that margin for error went from 0.01 to 0.001 or something.
Yes. And the dynamics are different between these aircraft and, say, like a turbine fan on a Bombardier. They've got, Joby is designing their aircraft to be extremely quiet, which then means that actually those rotors are spinning at a fairly low RPM. And so if you have a blade off scenario, it may not be that big a deal because the blades are composite, so it's very lightweight. It may not be a very big deal to get through that test. They've obviously designed for it. Again, you do testing so that you prove if you have a failure, you're not going to have a safety issue.
I think there's a comment here we need to bring up. And it's from Iman, and he says, "Mark, your expertise is seriously eye-opening." And I think that's the feeling for everyone here at the chat, if I can speak on behalf of everyone else.
I appreciate that, but I promise you I'm a tiny cog in a very large wheel in this industry. So no, I am in awe. I've said it before, when me and Reese are quiet, there's always a genius in the room, because
No.
you know what, we can't even compare.
Boys,
some of the knowledge.
I have just gone down the road many times. I just know where all the bumps are.
Yeah. Well, I think that's something we did need, because I think when you are investing, you want to know where the road bumps are, because if you know where they are and you kind of expect it, and then you do see it, you don't panic as much. Whereas if something comes out and you see a delay and you're expecting and got your hopes built up for a certain time, and then you find out this delay, you can have a lot of fear and feel a bit differently. Whereas if we're speaking about it here openly and discussing why everything happens the way it does, I don't know, it just gives me a bit more of a holistic view of everything. And you get to see a bit behind the curtain and understand why the certification has been such a long, rigorous process.
Mm-hmm.
So then the big trout race is back. Race is back. Welcome back to Race. Race was here during the week, and we are starting to scale out, guys. So we have Race on full ramp up, myself on full ramp up. With big things coming. Mark has entered the team now. Mark's going to create his own content. So look, guys, when Mark's here, feel free to always ask any question. eVTOL fan club will be all about questions and answers for Mark. eVTOL weekly, if Mark can make them, it'd be good to get his insight as an expert in the field on the eVTOL news. But then Mark's going to create his own videos as well. So look, he's had to do this off the top of his head today, which, look, I kind of threw him in the deep end there, which really wasn't fair for him. But guys, show him the appreciation, because the knowledge this man has. But imagine when he does his own videos, how he can convey that to you. You can go back and watch it as many times as you want, just to get your head around it. Sometimes it's harder to go back on these lives because you can't find where it is, what he spoke about. But we promise you guys, anything we speak about here, and if you want anything, make sure to jump into the comments. even after the live, jump down into the comments, put a topic down there, and Mark is more than happy to create a little bit of content around this. Now, we then have Archer said they aren't worried about this as they have many people doing training. I think this was going back to the pilots. Then HOVR is not aimed at flying taxi. Just wondering about retractable landing gear on HOVR, or am I think he's saying, or am I overthinking them?
You could do so. This is what's interesting when you have a similar to like what Archer has, where the gears just become part of the airframe. You can make a gear really small if it's going to come and land vertically, because it doesn't have to take the potential loads if you are landing as a normal airplane. Granted, you still need to have it designed to land as a normal airplane. They could do a retractable landing gear. Retractable landing gears are heavier. It's just there's no way of getting around it. As where if you can have part of the structure be your landing gear as well, that does save you a little bit in weight. Yeah, what HOVR's? I have a lot of questions on what HOVR's overall design is going to be. I'm curious, because HOVR says they're going to be FICI certified. But they also said that they want to operate and they want to fly 400 miles, but they only want to operate at 12,000 feet. And they're not going to be pressurized. In terms, if you're going to fly 400 miles, I'd want to be in a pressurized cabin, and I'd want to get up to 25,000 feet, which then gives you a turbine engine instead of a turbocharged internal combustion engine. HOVR's got ways to go in terms of their design. Obviously, they've proved their proof of concept, which is an amazing hurdle. And I'm a big advocate of HOVR and the design that they have. Of the three, as an engineer, I think their design makes the most sense. And I think in time, you're going to start to see Archer and Joby go more to a hybrid configuration. That could be just a different aircraft altogether at some point. HOVR's just getting started, but it's a gorgeous airplane.
And then just in terms of that hybrid model, is that due to the range of the vehicle that they would need to go for the hybrid model? For Joby and Archer. Sorry, for Joby and Archer, if they were going to be further down the design process, they're going to steer more to a hybrid model. Would that just be due to the range, or is that actually down to how to design the vehicle and get it approved?
Well, similar to what Brandon said, when you have a hybrid, you don't have to have infrastructure. You can use any heliport and come and land on this thing. So you can put it on a road. You can sell it to the masses. You can have an acre of land in a building in the back of it and go buy a HOVR. And now you walk outside and you don't need the infrastructure of an airport. It costs $20 million to $30 million to build a small county airport in the United States. Well, I wouldn't want that if I could just land in my backyard and take off and fly 400 miles. That is amazing. So Joby and Archer is going to require infrastructure. But yeah, with a hybrid, until battery technology can 20x, gas is still, and it's sometimes not popular, but it works. And it's the best thing we have at this point.
And then Terry has asked, I think, we've re-asked it here. Does the named wing manufacturer bear the responsibility of qualification or both? So I think he's saying, is it the manufacturer or is it Archer that has to qualify it, or do both have to qualify the wing?
I'm getting a lot of static, guys. Let me move a little bit. Maybe it'll improve. Can you ask the question one more time?
Yeah. So does the wing manufacturer or Archer both need to qualify the wing?
Archer is the manufacturer.
Archer is the manufacturer on that.
Yeah.
Hi, Liam. Hi, Reese.
Hi,
Hello there.
Terry. How's it going?
Guys, I'm going to leave and come back real quick, okay?
No problem.
I'm getting a lot of static. Give me 1 second. I'll be right back.
Perfect. Reese, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. I think,
Perfect.
yeah, let's go.
Go on.
No, just it's funny to see Mark's insight into this, and it does show you that there is so many rabbit holes that you can go into and learn so much about the engineering space of these eVTOLs.
I do find it unbelievable, guys. While we wait for Mark to come back, how far has this community come? We've grown from me and Reese in our bedrooms, me with a red background, us talking about eVTOLs, our love for eVTOLs, us trying to get into it. Then we brought Dylan on board, who is unbelievable. Anything to do with Archer Aviation. And now we have an aviation specialist in Mark Berry himself. Guys, feel free to ask any question that you want, anything that you want answered. It's not every day you get to speak to a pilot. However, every Sunday you will get to speak to a pilot, and every eVTOL Weekly you will get to speak to a pilot. Reese, I just want to say congratulations, brother. How much we've grown this community. It's only going to keep going. We are on a mission to ramp back up into our eVTOL content. Myself and yourself are going to be working together pretty well over there.
I find it amazing the fact that we started this basing it on us two just talking about eVTOLs. We had a lot of queries. I think we've sort of got to a stage now where the community is so big that we're able to answer a lot of the questions we had. Whereas before we would just be theoretically, or we'd have a hypothesis on what it might be, but now we can actually have a discussion. And I think that's sort of what the planning was the whole time, to have that sort of like hive mind. We could like throw questions out to people and see what came back. And it just gives us a bit more knowledge on the stock and see where we're going, like going forward.
No, thank you. And then, Mark, can you hear us okay?
Nate, I'm sorry. I've got a lot of static on when it's coming through my microphone. I don't know what's going on.
No, that's okay.
Don't know if I'll be able to continue or not, because I could just not hear anybody.
Yeah, that's okay. Do you want us to let you go, Mark? I know I am jumping off with Scott O in about an hour. But yeah, feel free to jump on. We'll be in contact anyway this week because we'll have a few calls together. And yeah, guys, show your appreciation for Mark. He's going to start creating a bit of content on the Hustle Brothers channel. He is a fan favorite. We just had to sign him up, boys. But yeah, Mark, feel free to drop if it is too much for you.
Yeah, I'm trying to listen, but all I'm hearing is static. So it could be in my head too. So I got to fly soon.
No, that's all good.
But yeah, I am going to run up, but I want to say just before leaving, if anybody on the channel has questions, I want to be here for the community, and I want to help educate the community as much as possible, and let's grow this channel as best as we can. The better content we can bring, and the better we can just make us all more knowledge on this process, the better the channel will be, and the better community we'll have.
Thank you so much for
just before you go there, Mark. I think we need to bring this one up here, and it's Eddie saying thanks, Mark, and I want to say from me and Liam as well. Big thanks for coming on. Been so insightful.
All
this
right,
video.
Guys. I'll talk to you guys later. You'll have a great day.
Sounds.
Yeah, and
Cool.
yourself, brother.
Cheers,
All right,
Mark.
bye. Keep the blue sky up, or the blue side up.
All right, brother. Race again. Unbelievable. Love that guy. I chats both on and off stream at the exact same. That's why I laugh. Even when we had the likes of Dave G, when we were speaking to any of our fans, or any of our fans, I'm not good enough to say that, boys. Any of our guests, it's just, I don't know. It just feels natural, and it feels like we can swing in and out of whether it's offline or online. Feels the exact same. Let me just clear up some of these messages here. So, got here late. Where has Terry invested? Sorry, Mark. From my understanding, I think he has a bit of a mix across the whole eVTOL. He does believe in HOVR, but
he likes the design, doesn't he?
I don't really want to speak for him, just because I don't think we've never properly spoken about it.
Yeah.
So we will ask him the next day. HOVR carrying cargo. That's why I asked about retractable landing. Yeah, okay. Bad sound. We apologize for that. I'm an OS. It could just be due to the weather over there, because I remember when he turned the camera around earlier on, it did look hot.
Yeah, it did. It's been hot over here at the moment.
It's been boiling here, not gonna lie. With the vibes and value you guys create, brothers to the moon. Thank you so much. Big respect. I'm Anos, and guys, make sure to check him out. Guys, please make sure to bang that subscribe button. The more people we get here, the more guests we can bring on. The more guests we can bring on, the more education we can spread to you. And you know what? Then you don't have to listen to the likes of me and Reese and our everyday lives. Thanks, Mike. But guys, what I want to say is my name's Liam. I'm one of the Hustle Brothers here. I have Reese, the other founding Hustle Brother. If you have any questions at all, please jump into the comments now once the stream ends and leave them for Mark. If there's any videos you want made, leave them for Mark. If there's any videos you want myself and Reese to research into and start scaling out, we can, because look, guys, we are aiming on getting myself and Reese back to doing what we were originally doing, getting videos out every single day. We will be here on the streams, but we want to start pumping out a lot more content for you guys. We know over the past while we've slowed down a little bit. We will scale back up. Race, until eVTOL Weekly, brother.
Until eVTOL Weekly. And yeah, thanks guys. Thanks everyone for coming. And yeah, we'll see you at eVTOL Weekly.